This episode of the podcast is brought to you by NutraBio, with no compromise since 1988, no proprietary blends and nothing but clinical dosages, as well as some of the best flavorings on the market. NutraBio has whatever you need, regardless of your sport or transformation. Use code word NATTY at checkout to save 10%. Well, whether you're a natty daddy or an enhanced baddie, I'd like to thank you for tuning into the inaugural episode of the U-Natty States of America here on the Generation Iron Fitness Podcast Network. Now, this podcast is going to be available on Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, starting with this inaugural podcast, I'm here to tell you that there's no money in natural bodybuilding. I'd like to welcome everybody back after that riveting intro. As I said before, this inaugural podcast is actually to talk about how there's no money in natural bodybuilding, but really what we're also going to go into is the fallacy of money in bodybuilding, period. In this U-Natty States of America podcast, we're actually going to dig pretty deep into all things bodybuilding. So I just want to make it clear that whether or not you're natural or you're interested in natural bodybuilding, we're really looking at sporting as a whole from my perspective as a natural bodybuilder. I'm Brandon Lirio. I'll be your host and guide throughout every one of these episodes in the U-Natty States of America. What I'm looking at in terms of my perspective is just how things are seen based on myself as a professional athlete from my side of the table. So, in this inaugural podcast, what I want to talk about is money in bodybuilding, right? The first thing we hear from new competitors, especially when they're deciding whether or not they're going to go with a natural organization or the NPC is, well, the NPC and the IFBB are where all the money are. Here's the thing. They're not necessarily wrong, and taking a look at some of the data from 2021, there's about $1.2 million worth of money that's in the prize pots as it relates to the IFBB if you were to win. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who wins is going to get $1 million. In fact, it doesn't mean that. There's a 0% chance because that prize pot doesn't exist. Now, when I took a look at some of the data from natural organizations and then in through the IFBB, some of these numbers may be a little bit ballparked in terms of figures of competitors and as well as some of the money figures in the past, just simply because there's so much information on the internet and, well, not everything on the internet is true. So, realistically, if you're a new competitor, the first thing that you're going to see on the road is posters for the NPC and the IFBB, and anybody that's been in bodybuilding long enough will tell you that the largest prize pots that are available are going to be at the Mr. Olympia contest in Las Vegas, which now takes place every December. Problem with that is you have to take a look at the sport as a whole, right? And how do these prize pots come about? Well, first things first, when you join any organization, whether it be natural or not, you have to pay your dues. That essentially means that you're going to buy a card that says that you're a card-carrying member of that organization. Natural or not, they all have their cards. A portion of that money is always going to go into the prize pot pool, which will then pay out their professional athletes when they win shows. I say professional athletes because a lot of people, even in the NPC when they're competing, don't understand that even if you win a show in overall, nationals, the universe, whatever, even if you win the amateur Olympia in any sport, doesn't matter, right? The only thing that is going to matter is if you want prize money, you need to become a pro. Pro cards actually cost more than the federation dues do as an amateur, obviously, because that's the amount that's going to go into the prize pots. The only problem with that is when you're voting with your dollar like that, you're essentially buying into the organization as a whole, meaning their rules, regulations, their judges panels. One of my favorite things to see is that everybody who watches bodybuilding will watch their favorite guy lose and go, oh, it's all politics. They knew this guy was going to win because he had a bigger following, or this guy had a better YouTube channel in terms of people who were watching. None of that stuff really matters if you've already paid your dues. Because essentially what you're doing is voting and saying, not only do I agree with the organization as a whole, but I agree with how they're allocating money and resources for the athletes. So, if you're listening to this and trying to decide which federation you want, I would actually go into the organization, look at the athletes and talk to them and say to yourself, hey guys, how do you like your organization and how things are run and how they use your dollar to your advantage as an athlete, whether it be for better trophies, better prize pots, better uniforms, whatever, right? Then you have to go into the last couple of years here within every organization and what they call the Great Pro Card Giveaway. The problem here with this dichotomy is you either have to show up and look at the organization as a whole, and they're going to say X amount of people must show up for you to be pro card eligible. Even if you look like you're a pro status from day one, it's not going to matter, because if enough people don't show up, and usually it's 3, 5, 7, depends on the organization, you're not going to go pro. So that makes a lot of people mad, simply because they say, well, I did the work and I showed up looking like a pro, I should be awarded my pro status so that I compete on a greater stage. And for all these NPC and IFBB guys who are going to say that's never happened to me, I've been to plenty NPC shows in different markets that it absolutely does happen, where you show up and compete alone and you get your national qualification. In fact, a lot of older IFBB pros have complained about this over the last couple of years because of how hard it used to be to get an IFBB pro card. Maybe 3 shows a year would offer that, and that's why there were so few pros. But then if you go back to the other bit of information I just said, with that being the case, there's so few pros, you're not going to get big prize pots. So if you're listening to this because you want to know where the money is, then you can't really complain that there are more pros, because how do you expect them to raise the prize pot if there are less pros in the organization? Or if you want to spend $2,000 on being a pro every year, which in that case, I don't think you need the money, right? So, that being said, if you take a look at the Great Pro Card giveaway on the other side, people essentially say, I don't think that pro cards should be given out if you're the only person who's competing in the Federation's division at that point in time. You can kind of see that argument, but again, if what you're expecting is, I'm going to do the work and show up, I look at the judges' criteria, I'm going to nail it straight on, and then I'm going to be rewarded because I look and act like a professional. I mean, that's a great thing to actually strive for as well, and honestly makes a lot more sense. It's the promoter's job to put asses in the seats and competitors on stage. So if you're the competitor and you show up and the promoter didn't do their job, well, it kind of sucks that you have to go home without the pro card and explain to everybody the numbers game, right? But that's not really what this episode of the podcast is for. This episode of the podcast is to talk about, is there any money in natural bodybuilding? So let's go over some numbers. The numbers I found online in terms of current IFBB Pro League competitors is 200 to 250 nationally affiliated members with over 6,000 events worldwide in terms of the NPC and the IFBB. Now, again, I got this from the ifbb.org website. That number seems low to me, but you know what? We're just going to go with it. So, if you take a look at some of the current natural federations in terms of their pros, it's pretty spot on in terms of being around that, somewhere between 200 and 400, especially considering my federation in the INBA operates in over 30 countries. You can understand that at the World Cup and the Olympia, you're going to have a lot more than just the local guys you've seen on stage stepping on stage as pros. And that also includes affiliated organizations that are allowed to give out pro status within that organization. The INBA has the GBFV, UK DBF. I remember that the PCA actually at one point in time, I believe, was offering IFBB Pro status, and now they don't offer that. If I'm wrong, I'd love to have somebody from the PCA on, but simply what I'm saying is these pro card holders are part of the prize pool, even if they're not competing that way in terms of that year. And what I mean by that is, as long as you carry a pro card in your organization and you continuously pay your dues every year, you don't actually have to show up to compete at all. Your wallet just has to show up to pay the dues. But again, that's really another conversation for another time. However, the cost of these cards is pretty extensive, right? The cost of an IFBB Pro card is around $200, and the cost of Natty Pro cards is somewhere between $120 and $200 as well. So if you're just looking to basically buy that as a, hey, I'm using this as an investment to go get money within the organization, you're already starting at a step back because you have to pay in. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying that should be right because that's how the organization gets paid. And it is a business. So if we take a look at the $1.6 million payouts from the 2021 Mr. Olympia, the bikini Olympia winner was $6,000 to $50,000, depending on where you placed in the lineup. Men's physique was between $2,000 and $35,000. Women's physique around $20,000. Bodybuilding overall, which is the top 12 pro bodybuilders in the world, Mohamed Elsbaye being the winner over the last couple of years, would be $400,000 for first place. Second place, Brandon Curry last year, $150,000. Third place, $100,000 with Hadi Choopan, and then fourth and fifth are $45,000 and $40,000 as a stair step downward. The 212, for example, though, if you're in fifth place, only gets $4,000, and if you're the winner, you get $50,000. For classic physique, I mean, Chris Bumstead brings so many asses to the seats, and yet here we are talking about prize payouts for the open bodybuilding class, and it's between $2,000 and $30,000. Now, don't get me wrong, those are nice chunks of change. But here's the thing, if you're talking about making money, none of those, with the exception of maybe the open bodybuilding and, maybe some of the bikini if you don't really need to prep that much. Not saying they don't. Please no hate mail. I'm simply saying if you're a little bit close to ready, you don't need to be, spending all this money on travel and things like that, especially considering if you're the first place bikini competitor from last year, you get the invite for free, so you don't need to compete that year. And keep in mind that what I was talking about earlier in terms of pro card registration numbers is just the card to say you're able to compete. Realistically, you still have to register for the show, buy your tan, buy your suits, hotel rooms, flights, food leading into it, right? So taking a look at all that money, what you then have to say is that's my break-even point. And the only one that could basically blow their break-even out of the water is the open bodybuilding class in the IFBB. So let's take a look at the natural competitions, right? I took a look at the Yorton Cup. It's between $3,000 and $5,000 per category, depending on which category you're going into. And the Natural Olympia with the INBA, PNBA is somewhere between $500 and $10,000. I've seen them go up to about $12,000 to $13,000 when the president was able at some inaugural events, or rather anniversary events, to put some more money in the prize pot out of his own pocket, right? But realistically, then what you're saying is, okay, what's my percentage of possibility in any of these organizations, whether it's tested or not, that I'm actually going to be able to win that money? And I think it's pretty funny that I actually have one of my first-year sponsorships on the wall behind me here in the podcast studio in my office, but that's another story for another time, right? So if we take a look at asking ourselves very realistically, how do I make money in natural bodybuilding? It's pretty clear looking at the initial numbers and the initial investments. It's not from winning shows, at least not from the prize money. So what we're actually asking ourselves is there any money in bodybuilding when it comes to what I can do as a professional athlete? And the trouble there is all of these professional athlete statuses, and I'm talking outside of bodybuilding, the NBA, the NHL, being a soccer pro, all of these goals, if you were to tell your family or your support structure, like your wife and your kids and your mom and dad, and you say, I want to be a professional athlete, if at any point in your life, and the reason I bring that up is because if you started earlier, obviously you have a greater probability of taking advantage of some of your early in life testosterone boosts, some of the ability of you to kind of learn how to do things a little bit better a little earlier on and utilize that for a longer period of time. But let's be honest with ourselves. If you were really good at football and you said to your parents, I want to be an NFL level quarterback, 90% of people would go, that's a pipe dream. You're not going to make that much money being a quarterback unless you're Tom Brady or Joe Flacco or Eli Manning or DJ Dimes, right? It's not you. It's not for you. And these guys are talking about tens of millions, depending on the sport, hundreds of millions of dollars. And most people would deter you from actually going into that sport. The reason we don't necessarily see that for bodybuilding is because, as much as I've said this on other podcasts, that it's not really a niche sport anymore, because I can go to the supermarket and buy dozens of magazines that can tell me how to properly bodybuild and the history of bodybuilding and all this other stuff. I don't really think it's a niche sport anymore. But I'd be lying if I said that it wasn't much more of a niche sport than football or soccer or hockey, right? So realistically then, understand that anyone who looks at a sporting event or fitness in general and says, I'm going to be a millionaire because I'm going to make a lot of money doing that, you're already a step behind the bell curve, and that includes myself, right? I left the military, which was a guaranteed paycheck, going, I'm going to make my millions on bodybuilding. Luckily, my support structure was all in. I guess we'll have to check their mental state, because I don't understand why they would be. But I thank them for it, because I did build a business, several businesses out of it. But that's the important part that I just said right there. I built businesses out of it. So is there any money in bodybuilding is now what we're going to talk about, right? Taking a look at those prize pots from 2 minutes in this conversation ago, you can understand that those numbers to most people, if I were doing it relatively easily, like showing up 3 weeks before the show, getting in shape, and then getting on stage, winning a $50,000 prize pot, or as a natural guy winning $12,000 on the Natural Olympia stage sounds friggin' fantastic. The problem is that's not what happens, right? The best competitors realize that they have to change based on the judges' criteria throughout the year. So it requires on-season and off-season plans. That includes diets, that includes cardio, lifting, right? Some people change sports like myself, with World's Strongest Everyman and me trying to compete in strongman and powerlifting events helps my musculature. But that's more money that goes into the pockets of different sporting events and different promoters so that I can do something different with fitness in general. So realistically then, you're already asking yourself, am I going to make money winning bodybuilding shows? Not is there any money in natural bodybuilding or bodybuilding in general? Take a look at the numbers, guys. Realistically, the answer is probably no. And even if you're one of, if not the best in the world, you could miss your conditioning by an hour and miss out on 30 grand if you're in the IFBB, or 5 grand if you're in the Naturals, or 3 grand if you're competing at the Yorton Cup, right? So if you take a look at yourself and say to yourself, okay, this is going to require a massive undertaking of time and effort to be a professional athlete at all in this sport, meaning bodybuilding, or powerlifting or strongman, really. My injury possibility is through the roof because I'm not just sitting there trying to pass the bar and become a great lawyer. I'm actually doing something very physical that's going to require not just a lot of my time, but a lot of my blood, sweat, and tears. And things change anatomy-wise and physiologically when you're going through these different years. I'm in my late 30s at this point, and preps are completely different, which in some cases is very good in terms of musculature and muscle maturity and my ability to kind of be able to dig deep without it seeming like torture. And then vice versa, it's not as easy in certain times of the year or in certain areas of the body to see any sort of real change because of the drop in testosterone or, my availability in terms of my time frame because of my kids or my businesses, right? So then we have to kind of zoom out a little bit and say, okay, is there any money in the fitness industry? And then again, everyone's going to go, oh, there's billions of dollars in the fitness industry, right? But the vast majority of people have an in somewhere that gives them that into their pocket, right? So realistically, let's take a look at the majority of people who are in the fitness industry, how they choose to monetize themselves, how they monetize their image, how they monetize their hard work to make money when they're not winning shows, or if they're not winning shows, and they never win shows. It doesn't mean that their knowledge base can't be taken advantage of. It doesn't mean that they can't be great coaches. It doesn't mean that they can't put out great information that helps people get stronger and fitter and, produce dramatic transformations when it comes to how the body looks and how it performs. So you have to really take a look at secondary revenue streams. That's going to be things like sponsorships, public appearances, guest posing, judging, personal training, whether it be in person or being an online coach, posing coaching. There's some people who will literally write fitness books when they're not competing so that they can have secondary revenue streams. Myself, I also have my line of supplement stores here in the Northeast on top of my coaching, and I'm the director of personal training at Steel Beach Gym in Oakville here in Connecticut. So even when it comes to myself, having won the universe twice, world championships twice, I've gone pro in the NGA, the INBA. I had pro qualification in the OCB, missed pro qualification in the WNBF by 1 point. I've been on most of these stages. I've competed in powerlifting in the APA and the USAPL, and I've competed in strongman in some local events, and I hope to compete in Connecticut's Strongest Man coming up next year, right? But what we're really asking ourselves then is, how do I monetize myself? So if you've started the conversation by asking, is there any money in X? Is there any money in anything, right? I have a very good friend of mine who's been a longtime client who worked for the state as a lawyer in the DCF, who basically did so because he went to work for a very well-known law organization in the 80s, and they basically told him in New York, hey, this is how much money you're going to get, and you're just going to have to be good with that because the word of mouth of you working here is what's going to grow people's need and want to seek you out. But the problem was it wasn't even enough to buy food and housing in that area. And we're talking about law here, right? So people strive to be doctors and lawyers, and then doctors exit medical school with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And again, you may spend a ton of money trying to become an NFL quarterback and spend money on coaches and equipment and gear, and never wind up playing in even a secondary farm team that the NFL is looking for and have nothing to show for it. So really, the name of this podcast should be, is being a professional athlete and expecting to be a millionaire a realistic expectation? Look, I love bodybuilding. I love fitness in general. Every time I go in the gym, it's the best part of my day. Being on stage is always the best part of my year. I love what I do. But realistically, what you're asking is an absurd question, because realistically, we're talking about a bunch of people who have agreed that sanctioning bodies of organizations are the best possible way to ensure fair judging, fair treatment of athletes, and a fair and balanced ease of use when it comes to understanding how the money is paid out and how it's used for advertising and making shows better or games better or whatever. Now, if you're in the fitness industry and what you're saying is right, but how do I capitalize on that? Looking at secondary revenue streams is a much smarter option than asking yourself, how much money am I going to make from winning a show? Because realistically, now we double back to, let's say, the IFBB versus the Naturals, you're asking about a percentage rate. Everybody that's ever come up to me and says, well, I'm competing in the IFBB and the NPC because that's where the money is. Okay, to even touch that money, we all now agree, you have to beat Big Ramy. Are you going to beat Big Ramy? I'm talking to you, guy out there who for some reason thinks that he's going to do better in the IFBB than just, staying natural and competing in a natural organization, which again, it's completely your prerogative. I usually get in hot water, actually, because as a natural pro, I've trained guys who are on gear, and I don't care if you are. Just stick to your organizations. If you choose to use gear and go to natural organizations, I don't dislike you because you use gear. I dislike you because you're a fucking liar, right? You're essentially signing a contract that says I'm natural and I'm doing what needs to be done to be a natural athlete, and you knew it was a lie from the jump. But if you're an enhanced athlete and you're competing in enhanced organizations that don't have a moratorium on drug use, then more power to you. I just hope you do it safely and soundly. But realistically, let's say you are just juiced to the gills. What's really the percentage of possibility that you're going to beat any of the guys in the top 10, let alone the top 3, to touch that prize money? Infinitesimally small. I've been very open in telling people that even in my category of classic physique at the Natural Olympia, winning $3,000 to $5,000, the probability is less than 5%. And in some years, now that the category is large, less than 1%. Because everything has to go my way. I have to have the most muscularity on stage, the best conditioning, the best posing. The judges have to go my way. The posing has to be on point on the day of. I got to peak correctly, right? Even travel could make your body look different than when you are on stage, than when you were a couple days before the stage. So what you're essentially asking is it possible and realistic for me as an athlete to consider myself the top 0.5% of even the fitness industry in terms of how I look, how I perform, and how I act, whether it be on a platform, in an event or on stage, to win money? And realistically, most people, and again, I've been at the top of the mountain, and I hope to be there again in a couple weeks at the Natural Olympia in Las Vegas. No, it's not. Every sport, until you become the guy, is an unrealistic expectation that you're going to somehow beat the odds and be the best in the world so that you can make a ton of money. But even if you take a look at an organization like the NFL, you're talking about 32 to 50 people within an organization. In the United States, there are 392 million people. And within the NFL, in terms of trying to add all those teams together, even if you're the backup to the backup, you're making, what, 50 grand, 75 grand? I think they said the lowest kicker in the organizations makes like 125 grand a year. I understand that you think that's a lot of money, but realistically, when taxes and things come out, it's not. So what you have to ask yourself is, how do I be smart as an athlete and monetize myself? And those secondary revenue streams are where the money is, whether it's in the IFBB, whether it's in the INBA, PNBA, OCB, WNBF, the secondary leagues for the NFL and the MLB and the NHL. Realistically, what you're going to make your money on is smart investments and secondary revenue streams. One of the greatest examples that I could possibly give is my good friend who's recently passed away, John Meadows. I fucking love that guy, man. I miss him every day. Anyway, he made most of his money on his YouTube AdSense and his supplement company, as well as his public appearances. So realistically, you have a guy who everybody knew and loved. The Mountain Dog was, I've never met a person who had a bad thing to say about him or his products. Never place in the top 5 at the Olympia and be completely comfortable within the fitness industry. So winning a couple pro shows throughout his whole career, here's a guy who made enough of a living to be comfortable and happy and healthy. I say healthy, to an extent, so that he could live his life the way he wanted to. And he never did it with prize pots from bodybuilding. So, as you guys listen to the end of this podcast, I want you guys to consider something very, very real. You need to be realistic with yourself. And one of the things I tell my clients is, you got to call yourself on your bullshit, right? And if what you're saying is, I don't want to stay natural and I want to go into the NPC and the IFBB because that's where the money is, do you really think that? Do you really think you've got a shot? And if you do, man, listen, people told me not to enter bodybuilding and I love it even to this day. So more power to you. But you have to really ask yourself, if the money is what you're out for, what's the probability of percentage rate that you're actually going to grab it? And if you're not Phil Heath, where everybody is telling you you're the gift, maybe it's first time to look at some secondary revenue streams before you get to the stage and think that you're going to pocket $400,000. And even as a natural guy, if you think you're going to show up to the Olympia, win the amateur, and then show up on stage day 2 and win the Pro Olympia and take away $10,000 from the PNBA, I think it's only ever happened like 3 times, and they were multiple time champions, and even they at some point lost. So, with the exception of Kiyoshi Moody, respect. If what you're saying is you have to win those prize pots because that's where the money is, even if you choose the right organization, the probability that you're going to win it every year is almost 0. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by bgfitonline.com. Battleground Fitness can train you in any sport that is currently on the market, whether it be strongman, powerlifting, stage competitions, and all genders are accepted. So if you have a transformation that you want to make, whether it be on stage, on a platform, or even just in your photos, BG Fit Online has a coach that could help you. So head to www.bgfitonline.com today and start your transformation. So, here we are at the end of this podcast, and my intention was not to deter anybody from competing or to make people feel like their federation is more than or less than. Realistically, I'm here to say this. Any idea that you're going to be a professional athlete and pocket a bunch of money is a pipe dream to begin with, but not one that shouldn't be pursued. It just needs to be pursued with caution by the right people. That means that you need to take a look at some posing coaches, take a look at some head judges in different organizations. Let them tell you what the probability of you being successful is and be able to listen to their feedback so that you'll know if what I'm in this for is a successful career and money, how close am I to that ever being a possibility, let alone how I'm standing in front of this person right now. Don't take it personally. Take it as a point of contention in terms of, hey, this is going to tell me the direction of where I'm going to go next. It's either going to put my eggs into this basket and start diversifying my portfolio of how I'm supposed to make money, or to understand that even though I love this sport, I'm going to try to give it a shot at the amateur level and understand that it may just never happen for me. But whoever you are out there, in whatever your sport is, and why ever you're listening to this specific episode, I hope you do make it, and I hope you make $1 million, and I hope you call me up and you say, Brandon, you're a piece of shit. You lied to me. I made $1 million. Go fuck yourself. Here's to hoping you do, guys. So, Episode 1, United States of America. Again, please be sure to rate, subscribe, and leave a review on either Apple iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever your podcasts are available. And if you're on YouTube, be sure to check out my YouTube channel, Brandon Lirio, and my series throughout Ironman Magazine, The World's Strongest Everyman, where I travel the world looking to learn from the best so that I can become the strongest, even though I may not be the biggest. So, if you're in the Las Vegas area, we have the Natural Olympia with the PNBA coming up Veterans Day weekend in November, so feel free to stop by. And as these podcast episodes come out, I look to kind of advertise some of the bigger shows that are around the United States and kind of give people an idea as to where they can get more information in terms of registering for those shows. So if you have an organization you want to hear about, or if you want to know more about the PNBA or myself as the world's strongest everyman, please feel free to comment below. And if you're watching on YouTube, like I said, smash the subscribe button. So I hope everybody stays fit, and this is just your reminder, you don't always have to be big to be strong.